Hi, so today we're going to be learning about the Myaamia tribe of Oklahoma. And just as an introduction, my name is Aryss. I go by she, they, and then...
I'm Kara. I go by she, her.
Okay, and we are not affiliated with the Myaamia tribe. We are just students at Miami University right now. Okay, so we want to start this lesson by doing true or false questions, just to test to see where we're at right now, and if we have any knowledge of the Myaamia tribe. Okay, so the first one is the Myaamia tribe are from the past and no longer exist. The second is that the Myaamia tribe at one point lost their language completely. And the last one is that the Myaamia tribe are from Ohio. Okay, and then on the screen we have this word. I wanted to have guesses of what this could mean, if it's part of the tribe or not. Okay, and then how we pronounce this is Myaamia Tewenke. Okay, and then this is actually the language that the Myaamia tribe speaks. So we have a few words that we want to teach you, just as, to get us introduced to the language. So the first one we have is Aya, which means hello, just a general hello. So if I say hello, if I say Aya, I want you to say it back, Aya. And then the next one.
The second word we have is Oche, which means hey. So this is also like an attention grabber. So if we ever notice that you're a little bit distracted, we might say Oche, and then that means that you should bring your eyes to the front and pay attention.
Okay. And the last one is one of the most important ones. It's Newe. It means thank you. And then I'll say Newe, and then I want you to repeat it back to me. Newe. Okay. Okay. So then the next thing we're doing is a video. It was by Gerald Baldwin, who is a Myaamia member, or part of the tribe. He created this video. It's called The Coming Out Story. We will see some language that we are not familiar with. We want to be as respectful as possible, and by that we mean have our ears listening. We want to be quiet during this, just so we can get the full story. And we are going to be hearing it first in Myaamia Tewenke, and then we're going to be hearing it a second time in English. So for the first time, it'd be fine if you just watch the imagery on the side of it, and then for the next video, we can get an understanding of what he's saying, as well as focus on the imagery. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, do you want to touch? Okay.
Where did I go back?
I don't know. Let's just assume we played the video and move on.
Yes.
Okay.
Do you have your volume up?
I don't know.
Oh my God, turn the volume up.
We were just doing the rehearsal.
I know.
Iweonge, Itami. Nipingonji niweo sa chikke mu ki chikke. Hemetana kwake sa ka kwelo iliti chikke. Nehesa ka chwe wache. Nungin yahai minute chikke. Nianje machi ka chikke. Minutene nikatangike. Kaputwe ngote apoyata. Apwe piata kwetakake meto seniake newa chikke saki weonge. Na pasa nate ila tawe chikke ila tawe ange. Nehesa wenda wache. Matehko kisena akana ila chikke na meto seniake. Muhchininge kilema su enjina kosawache. Muhche aweake kihkilema wata ehe ayawache. Unine ningike ishimewache ningia seka kweta amesale wa bange kwa. Cheke mito seniake kiyoshiake lame tangeke. Sipiwe, sakiwe sipiwe wendangeke ehonje sakachewe wache. Ininu yungonje nije wendinjeke seka kweta, seka konanga, seka kokwa. At first, the Miamis came out of the water. And the place they came out of is called the coming out place, Saakiweonge. The first Miamis to come out of the water, grab hold of tree limbs, they yelled at each other. So they grabbed hold of those tree limbs, they pulled themselves out of the water. And right there along the bank of the river, they built a town and stayed there for some time. Eventually they headed off, they left the town. After a while, one of them returned. And when he returned, he saw other people who were living there. And to our surprise, they sounded just like us. So he gave them a name, Old Moccasins, he called them. Nobody knew where they came from, and nobody knew where they went. This is what my mother's told me. My mother's Seika Kweta and her older sister, Wa Bangekwa. And all the old Indian men believed it. The river is called the Coming Out River, right there at the place where we came out of. It's for this reason we have the names Seika Kweta, Seika Konanga, Seika Kokwa. Ehinge.
Okay.
Thank you for listening and paying attention.
Okay, and so moving on to the next slide, since we have the origin video of where they came from, they have been moved around since then. So we want to give you some vocabulary just to prepare you for what we're going to share with you next.
The first word is revitalization, and that means to bring back something that was lost. So you're putting new life into something that has been lost. The second word we have is forced removal, and that means forcing people from their home, usually with weapons or violence against their will. And the third word we have is contemporary, and that just means anything in the modern day or the present times. And lastly, we have displacement, and it's pretty much the same as forced removal, except that forced removal always involves violence and it's against someone's will. Displacement could just mean being moved somewhere without violence. It's more general.
Okay, and so here we have a map. It doesn't really look like our present day maps that we have currently. This shows the different rivers, and it's a Myaamia map. So they started up at the top of Illinois is where they're coming out. Story had happened, and then they slowly moved downwards, and then over here we have, so they moved into Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois, and then they have spread out for more of the land. And then just to give you some more perspective of where we are compared to that, here's a more present day map. And so we have, again, Indiana, Illinois, and then Ohio over here. And then this is where, so the people of Myaamia have been forcibly removed from their land. So starting up here in Peru, so they were taken up farther up, and then they got onto a boat, and then went down the Mississippi and moved all the way down over to Kansas, and then down to Oklahoma from there. So it was a very long journey, and then not many people made it through. They had either died, or those that did stay were forced to be removed from their culture, so they were no longer allowed to practice it.
And a lot of the people, once reaching the end of their journey, were facing a winter and a climate they weren't used to, and a lot of them died in the first few months. So it was a really hard time for all of them.
Okay, so then at the beginning of this removal, the Europeans had came in and forced them to sign treaties that gave away part of their land, and they forced them across the Mississippi. So they wanted to get them to go more westward, so they could settle in the east. So over time, they had been signing more and more treaties that would take over their land, and they were able to put off their movement for around 6 years after they had signed their last treaty. But once that 6 years hit, they had forcibly come in with weapons, the military had, and they forced them to start their walk over and then get on a boat downwards towards Oklahoma.
And it was a really hard journey because they were on horseback, they were on boats, and at one point they had to be at a prison camp before they reached their destination, and it took many months.
And on 1846 was the year that Oxford was built as well. So they had to remove them for the building of the school. Some of the effects of the forced removal was, again, like I mentioned before, the stripping of culture. They weren't allowed to practice their culture. They weren't allowed to do any dances or arts or any speaking of language or religion. And this had actually caused them, for the language aspect, since they were separated so far apart, because they now were just displaced all throughout multiple states from each other, they had lost their language completely in the 1960s, because their last Myaamia, the fluent speaker, had passed away. So this left them with only documentation of what had happened, as long as with their language. And then, next slide. Here we go. And then this leads to the revitalization of the language. So the language was actually strictly spoken. It was never written down or read for the Myaamia people. So when the Europeans had come over here, they were simply writing down what they heard. So it's more of a phonetic spelling of what this like current language is that they speak. So in order to get where we are now, they had to translate the Old French and try to translate the Old French into more New French, so then they can translate it into the Myaamia language, which took a while. They started the documentation process in the early 2000s, or the going through documents in the 2000s to rebuild this language, and they actually were able to create words on their own based on the prefixes and suffixes that they had learned through the documentation. So they have learned a lot from them. There's still some things that they don't have specific words for, but they are creating new ones to help with that hole there. Okay. And then, like I said, the Old French and phonetic spelling. So they only had solely a speaking language, but then we were able to translate that into their current language now.
It's because there was a document where someone from Old French tried to translate the Myaamia language, so they had basically all the Myaamia words on one side of the paper and then all of the Old French on one side, explaining what they meant or what they thought they meant. And then now we have to translate all of this back into modern French and then English to be able to understand it over here in Ohio. And
And then those documents are actually on display. A few of them are at the Oxford campus. Okay. And then
revitalization. So in addition to bringing back the language of the Myaamia people, people are working to also bring back other elements of their culture that was lost during all of this forced removal and their hard history. So some of the other things that they're trying to bring back include like sports, like lacrosse is very important to them, and other games, and then dances and storytelling, which right now they're having like 2 events at the summer and winter solstice, where they have all of these things happening. There's games to play, and then storytellers and dances specific to their tribe, such as the stomp dance. And another thing they're bringing back is ribbon work, which is folded and sewn fabric into intricate patterns, which was usually worn for special occasions on their outfits. And they're bringing this back in also a modern way. They're making things inspired by it. They're making apparel with it and bringing back this element of the culture and holding conventions to like teach people of the Myaamia tribe how to do this, and to teach them all the games and all the other elements of their culture.
Yep. So they do have those workshops that the younger generation can do in order to learn more about their language, and they do have the yearly gatherings. And a fun fact about that is that last year was the first time that the lacrosse game was played with completely wooden sticks. So they make their own. They make their own lacrosse sticks. There's a few specialists that do it. So they've been trying to do a more traditional route. So they learn more about their heritage that way too. Okay. Can we do that one? Or you want me?
Yeah. We already touched on this a little bit earlier, is that they're bringing back the ribbon work. And again, that's the fabric folded and sewn down into intricate patterns. Usually they involve like diamond shapes, and they're typically red, white, and black. And you're going to learn a lot more about ribbon work next week when we're going to be doing a deep dive into the history of it, and then a ribbon work inspired craft for everyone to participate in. And then some artists who do ribbon work in the present day are Karen Baldwin and Kara Strauss. And we'll take a look at some of their artwork next week too. We just wanted to do a brief introduction to get you guys prepared for what we're going to be looking at next week.
Okay, and then the overall message of this lesson is that we want people to understand that the Myaamia are contemporary people. They still exist in today's world, and they have similar government styles compared to us, and are just a lot like us in many ways. They have their own police department, they have their own governments.
They have their own courts, and
they have a business council, which is like their main government is called, and then they go around and do different business deals, and they actually visited the school in the 1990s. Was it the 1990s?
I think so.
Okay, we need to fact check that. And they actually created a partnership with the campus that recognized one another, and we acknowledged that their removal from this land, because this school was built
on Myaamia land.
On Myaamia land in 1846. So we've done partnerships with them where we acknowledge that, and then we also have the heritage logo and the Myaamia Center built, and we have a logo that was created. We should probably add a picture of that.
Yeah.
Where there's a red dot in the center, and then there's a diamond around that one, and then two other diamonds connecting to it, similar to the ribbon work that we've been seeing. And
it represents Miami University and the Myaamia tribe working together, and then the fire in the middle is like the burning embers of their growing relationship. Mm-hmm. And we do other stuff to recognize the Myaamia tribe as well. Like the Myaamia Center, like she mentioned, includes all the history about the tribe's relationship with Miami University, and students can always go there and learn more about it. And then we have scholarships for students from the Myaamia tribe, to recognize that this was their land. And then I think there's specialized classes about their heritage to help them learn more about it if they're interested. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That was actually the end.
Oh, and then thank you all for listening today.
And we will be getting more into the ribbon work next week. We are creating a bookmark inspired by the Myaamia ribbon work, traditional ribbon work that's done with fabrics. Yeah, we good?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay.
And then before we end the class, we also wanted to go back to the true or false, give you guys the answers, and just make sure that you took something from this lesson and you're going to bring it forward next week. And we just want to make sure that you retained all the information.
Okay, so for our first true or false, we said that the Myaamia people no longer exist in today's world.
Hopefully you've learned that this is incorrect, and the Myaamia people are contemporary people with a lot going on today.
Yeah, and there's also over 7,000 of them living in
across the United States
that identify as Myaamia citizens across 49 states, and then also internationally. So then the second one is that the Myaamia at one point had completely lost their language, and then we can also see that this is true. And it was due to the fact that they were forcibly removed from their home, and then forced to
give up part of their culture.
give up part of their culture and became dormant. And less were they practicing the language until the very last fluent speaker had died. And then the last one was that the Myaamia are from Ohio.
And that is true.
That's not true.
Oh, it's
Well, it is partially true. They did start in the
we should
top
start
of
it over.
Illinois. So their coming out story, it's around Illinois, and then they moved their way downwards by themselves. And then where they ended up near Ohio. And then from that point, they were then forcibly removed downwards through Kansas and then into Oklahoma.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening, and we are so excited to see you next week.